My fiancée deceived me by pretending to be humble for 2 years. But when we planned the wedding, she demanded spending $80,000 and trashing my $3,000 ring. I canceled everything and bought a cabin. Now she's still hunting for someone to finance her fantasy while I live debt-free. I'm 31 years old. I work as a network technician, and about a year and a half ago, I ended an engagement that I thought was going to be for life. The truth is, I'm still surprised by how something that started so well could go to shit so quickly, but I guess sometimes you don't really know someone until you start planning a future together. And when I say you don't know someone, I mean it can literally be like you're engaged to a completely different person than the one you thought you knew. I grew up in a small town, one of those where everyone knows each other and people don't go around showing off things they don't have. My parents worked hard, my dad in construction and my mom as a secretary at the elementary school, and while we never lacked anything, there wasn't much extra either. But the most important thing I learned from them was to handle money wisely. My dad always said, if you can't pay for it in cash, then you can't afford it, period. No credit cards left. And, right, no buying things just to impress the neighbors, and definitely no debt that wasn't absolutely necessary. I remember when I was like 12, I wanted a new Nintendo, and my dad made me work all summer, helping him on small projects to earn it. Not because they couldn't buy it for me, but because he wanted me to understand the value of money and work, and honestly, that lesson stuck with me. I met Rachel when I was 29, at a party my friend Connor threw to celebrate his new house. She was friends with Connor's girlfriend, and honestly, at first, I didn't think she was my type, but we started talking and there was something about her that caught my attention. She was an elementary school teacher, loved to read, was funny, and when I told her I liked fishing and camping on weekends, instead of making a face like other girls I'd dated, she seemed genuinely interested. She told me she'd never been fishing but would like to try it, and I thought, well, this one is different. We started dating, and honestly, it was amazing. Rachel seemed totally comfortable with my simple lifestyle. Our dates were going to the movies on Wednesdays when tickets were cheap, having picnics in the park, cooking together at my apartment instead of going to expensive restaurants. She drove a 2015 Honda Civic she'd bought used, and never complained that my truck was a 2010 model. We'd go fishing at the lake almost every weekend, stay at my uncle's borrowed cabin. Well, it wasn't mine, but he let me use it. And Rachel always said she loved how simple everything was, that it felt more real than the superficial relationships she'd had before. I was in love, completely convinced I'd found someone who shared my values. After 2 years together, I decided to propose. I saved for 6 months to buy her a ring, and it wasn't cheap, eh? I spent like $3,000 on a custom blue sapphire ring because I knew sapphire was her favorite stone, and she always said diamonds were too common. I had it made. By a local jeweler, it had a vintage design I thought she'd love. I took her to the lake where we'd gone on our first fishing date, waited until sunset, and proposed right there on the dock. She cried, said yes, hugged me, and told me it was the most beautiful ring she'd ever seen. Honestly, it was one of the best moments of my life. I thought everything was perfect. The first few weeks after the engagement were great. Rachel showed the ring to everyone, posted photos on social media, told me I was the most thoughtful man in the world for giving her something so unique and special. But then I started noticing little things. Her mom looked at the ring with a slightly forced smile and said something like, "Oh, how interesting. A sapphire. How different." Her friend Sophie, who would later be her maid of honor, commented that it was pretty, but she personally preferred something more traditional. And Rachel started defending herself, saying things like, "Well, David is very practical and responsible, and I appreciate that." At the time, I didn't think much of it, but looking back, I should have seen it coming. When we started planning the wedding, everything changed. And when I say everything changed, I mean it was like someone had replaced my girlfriend with a completely different person. At first, we talked about doing something small and intimate, like 50 people max, at the town community center or maybe at my parents' house, which has a big yard. I'd saved like $10,000 for the wedding, and I figured with that we could do something nice, but simple, Rachel agreed. Or at least it seemed that way. We made a preliminary guest list and everything was going well. But then she started spending time with her mom planning things, and the guest list started growing. First, it was some cousins who initially weren't going to come, then coworkers who, according to her, she couldn't not invite, then family friends her parents insisted on including. In 2 months, the list went from 50 people to over 200. When I told her that wasn't what we'd agreed on, she told me it was just to send the invitation. But I knew that wasn't true. Then came the venue issue. The community center was no longer nice enough, according to Rachel. She showed me this place in the city, like an hour from where we lived, that cost $8,000 just to rent the space. $8,000. Can you believe it? I told her that was almost our entire budget just for the venue, and she looked at me like I was being ridiculous. She told me all her friends had gotten married in nice places, and she wasn't going to have her wedding in a hall that was used for garden club meetings. I tried to reason with her, showed her other more affordable places that were just as nice, but she dismissed them all, saying they weren't special enough. And it wasn't just the venue. Rachel wanted plated dinner service instead of buffet, which added like $40 per person. She wanted a live band instead of a DJ. She wanted to hire a wedding planner who charged $3,000 because, according to her, it was impossible to plan a wedding without professional help. Every time I suggested a more affordable alternative, she'd sigh and tell me I was ruining her special day. Her mom didn't help at all, constantly putting ideas in her head about what a proper wedding should be and what her friends would think if we did something too modest. One night, like 3 months before the date we'd originally planned, I showed up at her apartment unannounced because I wanted to surprise her with pizza. I found her on her laptop searching Google for how to upgrade your engagement ring and best jewelers for used ring trade-ins. When she saw me, she quickly closed the laptop and got all nervous, trying to explain that she was just browsing, that one of her friends had sent her a link. But I knew what I'd seen. I sat there on her couch and asked her directly if she didn't like the ring I'd given her. She said she loved it, but her tone wasn't convincing. She told me she just thought maybe we could upgrade it in the future, when we had more money, because after all, we were going to be together forever, and the ring could evolve with us. I tried not to feel bad, but honestly, it hurt like hell. Things kept getting worse. Rachel picked bridesmaid dresses that cost $400 each, Vera Wang brand, when we'd talked about something her friends could buy for under $150. She planned a bachelorette trip to Miami that was going to cost like $2,000 per person. When I told her my bachelor party was going to be a camping weekend with my friends, that would cost us basically nothing. Every time I tried to talk to her about costs, she accused me of not understanding that this was important to her, that it was her only marriage, that I was being cheap. Finally, we reached the breaking point. One night, Rachel sat down with me with a calculator and a list of all the expenses she wanted for the wedding. The total was $55,000. $55,000. I told her she was completely crazy if she thought I was going to spend that on a wedding, and she told me we could take out a loan. A loan for a wedding. I told her no, absolutely not. That starting our marriage in debt went against everything I believed in. She started crying and told me I didn't love her enough, that if I really cared, I'd make this sacrifice for her. I told her that loving her didn't mean being financially irresponsible, and that if she couldn't understand that, then we had a serious problem. Rachel then tried to involve my family. She told my sister Emma that I was being inflexible and didn't want to give her the wedding she deserved. Emma, who's always been more sentimental than practical, called me and said maybe I should consider how important this was to Rachel. I explained the whole situation to her, the real numbers, and Emma went quiet. But by then, Rachel had already planted enough doubts. My mom asked me if I was sure we couldn't make some compromises, and I showed them exactly how much Rachel was asking for and how long it would take us to pay off that loan. My dad supported me immediately, told me he wasn't going to let me make that financial mistake, but the damage was already done. Rachel had made my own family question whether I was being reasonable. The worst came when Rachel's parents invited me to dinner. I thought it was going to be a normal dinner, but it turned out to be an ambush. Her dad, who's an accountant and definitely knows numbers, I started talking to me about how people always find a way to finance important things and that they couldn't contribute much, but expected that I, as the man in the relationship, could provide what their daughter wanted. Her mom told me Rachel had dreamed about her wedding since she was a little girl, and it would be a shame if I was the reason she didn't have the day she deserved. They talked to me about image and reputation, about what people would think, about how they'd already told their friends and family about certain details, and it would be embarrassing to have to change plans. Basically, they tried to guilt me and force me into going into debt for a one-day party. I sat there listening to them, with Rachel looking at me with hopeful eyes like her parents were going to convince me, and something in me just clicked. It wasn't anger exactly. It was more like a sudden clarity. I realized this wasn't just about a wedding. It was about fundamental values and about who I was choosing to spend the rest of my life with. I told Rachel's parents I appreciated their concern, but my decision was made. I told them I wasn't going to start my marriage in debt, and that if Rachel couldn't accept that, then maybe we weren't compatible. Rachel started crying and accused me of ruining everything, and I just stood up, told her I was sorry, but this wasn't going to work, and left. The following weeks were horrible. Rachel told everyone I was a selfish cheapskate who didn't love her enough to give her a decent wedding. Her friends sent me messages telling me I was an idiot. Some of our mutual friends took her side because, according to them, what's wrong with wanting a nice wedding? My sister, Emma, apologized to me after my dad explained everything to her in detail, but the damage to my reputation was already done. I felt like shit. I'm not gonna lie. I questioned whether I'd done the right thing, whether I'd been too harsh, whether I should have tried to find a middle ground. But then, like 2 months after breaking up, I found out through Connor that Rachel was already dating someone new, a lawyer named Brandon who she met at some event or another. At first it hurt, not because I wanted to get back with her, but because it made me feel like I'd been easily replaceable. But then I started hearing stories. Sophie, Rachel's best friend who had been her planned maid of honor, ran into me one day at the supermarket and told me Rachel was doing exactly the same thing to Brandon. Apparently, Rachel was already planning what her wedding with Brandon would be like, showing him expensive venues and talking about big diamond engagement rings. Sophie told me she felt bad for doubting me and now understood why I'd ended things. Fast forward like 6 more months. Connor called me laughing to tell me Brandon had broken up with Rachel. Apparently, she'd given him an ultimatum. Either they got engaged and she had the wedding she wanted, or it was over. Brandon, who according to Connor is much smarter than I was, told her he wasn't ready for that level of financial commitment and probably never would be with someone who valued a party more than the couple's financial future. Rachel was devastated. From what I heard, because she really thought Brandon with his money was going to give her everything she wanted. Turns out, even people with money aren't stupid. While all this was happening, I moved on with my life. I used the money I'd saved for the wedding as a down payment on a small cabin near the lake. It's nothing fancy. Needs some repairs, I'm doing myself little by little, but it's mine. I have zero debt aside from the mortgage. I still go fishing on weekends, and honestly, I'm more at peace than I was in those last months with Rachel. My sister Emma comes to visit often and always tells me I did the right thing, that I dodged a bullet, as they say. My parents are proud that I stood firm in my values. The last time I heard anything about Rachel was like 3 months ago. Sophie told me Rachel is dating someone else, another guy who apparently has a good job, and she's already starting with the wedding talk again. I don't know if this guy will last longer than me or Brandon. Honestly, I don't care. What I do know is that Rachel is never going to find someone willing to go into debt for a one-day fantasy, at least not someone who's financially responsible. And if she finds someone who is willing, they'll probably end up with money problems that will destroy their marriage anyway. Sometimes, when I'm at my cabin looking at the lake, I think about what my life would have been like if I'd married Rachel. We'd probably be fighting about money constantly, drowning in loan payments, unable to save for anything, stressed and miserable. And all for what? To impress 200 people at an 8-hour party? It doesn't make sense. People who really love you don't need fireworks and 5-course dinners to celebrate your love. My parents got married in my grandparents' backyard with 30 guests, and they've been happily married for 35 years. That's what matters. There were nights when I felt lonely and wondered if I'd ever find someone compatible with me. There were moments when I doubted myself and thought maybe I was being too rigid with my principles. But every time I looked at my bank account, every time I went to my cabin that I could buy because I didn't go into debt, every time I slept peacefully without worrying about loan payments, I knew I'd made the right decision. The truth is ending that engagement was one of the best decisions of my life. Not because I didn't love Rachel or because I didn't believe in marriage, but because I realized in time that our fundamental values were completely incompatible. She valued appearance and what others thought more than financial stability in the future. And I just can't live like that. I can't sleep at night knowing I owe money I don't need to owe. I can't pretend it's okay to start a life together with tens of thousands of dollars in debt just because that's what weddings look like on Instagram. Now I'm 31, work in the same job, have my cabin, and I'm good. I'm not in a serious relationship, but I'm open to meeting someone when the time is right. And when that time comes, it's going to be with someone who understands that love isn't measured by how much money you spend on a party, but in the sacrifices you make for each other every day, in building a future together, in making smart decisions that benefit you long term. Someone who would rather have their own home than a magazine wedding. Someone who values financial security more than impressing people who probably won't even remember your wedding in 5 years. Do I regret breaking up with Rachel? Not at all. The only thing I regret is not realizing sooner who she really was. But I guess that's part of life. You learn and move on. And if my story can help someone else not make the same mistake, then all this was worth it.